Greetings, everyone. Here we are again with another Foundational Friday experience on the Enlightenment and Transformation channel. I am your host, Yuya Assaan-ANU, and as always, I am exceedingly grateful to have you in this space with me, sharing this time with me, and sharing this information. Okay, in this session, we're going to be dealing with an interesting concept. We were going to go into the Ibeje, or the science and the energy of the twins, which we're going to put off for a moment. Our last session, we were dealing with the concept, the problem and the plague of the psychic vampire, right? Or the psychic drainer, or even the spiritual and psychic rapist. And we spoke about some ways that they can be identified. And, I want you all to check out, there's a post on the Sadulu House website. If you haven't been there before, please definitely head over to Sadulu House, SADULUHOUSE.com. And if you do a search, there's a post I put up some time ago about false prophets. And that idea, that concept of the false prophet would definitely fit very well into what we were speaking about in our last session in terms of those who come in to rob, rape, kill, destroy any form of energy or ascension that we are experiencing, because they are unable to gather that energy unto themselves. It's very interesting when you look at other cultures, other mythologies, other religious systems outside of the sphere of those we know to be the older or oldest people on the planet. And you'll find that consistently the highest form of astral ascension that can be reached. And when I say astral ascension, I'm speaking of this place called heaven that we speak about. But the highest form of heaven typically and usually exist on the planet, but it can be reached through perseverance. Now, obviously, this is symbolic. When we think about Mount Olympus, when we think about Valhalla, and we know that climbing the highest mountain in order to get to these spaces would be an act of perseverance, which is related and symbolic of how we must persevere through our journey of life and through our trials and through the things we don't like about ourselves, through our egoic hang-ups, in order to experience those moments of true enlightenment, self-possession, thought recognition and management, and that guru state that we speak of. But aside from what we're seeing there symbolically, we also have this idea and this thought that the highest form of obtainment can only be realized on the planet. Whereas when you look outside of that sphere of thought, that school of study, you have people who have said, no, my home is not even in this dimension. I don't even come from this dimension. This world is not my home. I come from Mars, or I come from the Sirius star system. I even come from the moon. I come from the sun. All of these other concepts. But it's so interesting that they speak to coming from a place that is not here. So if that is accurate, and we know that we exist in different places at the same time, concurrently, then the smallest part of what we are, as we know to be, here we're speaking about, as you're listening to me, where you're listening to me, is on the planet Earth. Now, for those of us who are in the spiritual training phase 1, you've gotten to the lesson where we speak about the planet. What is the planet? Well, the plan we have, and et means small, right? If you're talking about et, it's things that are small. Okay, so the planet would be the small plan. So where is the greater plan? Where is that housed? Or is it even housed? Is it even something that can be contained within a structure, spiritual, celestial, or otherwise? But the point that I'm making here is that there's an acknowledgement that the smallest part of our awareness, or the smallest part of what we are, exists here on the planet in this reality, in this dimension. And there is a larger part of us that exists somewhere. But if we come from the mythological interpretation of those who believe that the largest part of them could only possibly exist just above others on the same planet, then that would mean that the largest part of them is still encapsulated within the small plan, or the small or the planet. So it's something you might want to give some thought to when you study other cultures and you're trying to find the similarities, but also understand the differences, and why, based on those mythological and religious doctrines that we come across, why and how has it created a certain type of mind. If I was of the understanding that the only place that I could possibly exist was on this small plan, or this planet, then I would do any and everything I possibly could to maintain my position on the planet, as opposed to me understanding and knowing that the largest part of me exists outside of not only the surface, but outside of this physical reality. Then I would be able to detach from what this place is, from what its notions are, from what its doctrines are, much easier than if I didn't have a philosophy or a life calculation that takes me from this space. It may give you reason as to why some are so fight so viciously to be here, and others are not as concerned, right? So this leads us into what we are speaking about when we speak about people who are starving for energy. But before we get into exactly, more of that, which we pretty much covered in our last session, what I'd like to really speak about this time around is the whys of that deficit model, or that mentality of starvation. And more importantly, how is it that we're able, or we tend to sometimes slip into these thoughts? And one of the things that really struck me, I was thinking earlier today, and I was just thinking about numbers, and in our phase 2 of our spiritual training, what I'll actually be getting into is why we use certain numbers, colors, and scents, and attach them to certain cosmic archetypes. It's very interesting. A lot of times whether you get books or, in our teachings, we've all come through this, we're told to use a certain amount of things for various orishas, let's say, 6 for this one, 3 for that one, 21 for that one. But we're not really told what those numbers mean, if the person telling us even knows. And even more importantly, with the colors, which is a big thing, because colors do so much. It's very rare that it's shared with us why we're using the colors that we're using. What is the effect? And sometimes we can look and it's a little obvious, and I've covered this a bit in the shows, like if we look at the green that's used in the New World, interpretations of Ogun, we know that Ogun represents agriculture as well as money, so, okay, makes sense, right? Oshun representing abundance, colors being yellow or more so gold. Makes sense. Okay, got that. Yemoja, blue, water, So some of it makes sense in terms of just on the surface level. But colors have a very strong vibratory energy to them. This has been scientifically explored and researched. And we'll get into some of that, in phase 2, why we can use and how we can use these numbers and colors in formulas and rituals of our own. But let's get back to this concept of on the earth, off the earth, right? But I want to do that speaking about 2 different numbers that come up a lot, right? One being the number 7. Let's start with 7. And in most instances, we're told about the divinity of the number 7, or we see the divinity of the number 7, right? On some of our spiritual and cultural systems, that's the number of the banner. You know, you see that number 7, and we're told that it represents the Almighty, or it represents what some people call God. 7 represents the number God, right? Even the name Sheba is 7, or Saba, right? Saba or Sabah means 7, and where we also get Sabbath, right? The Sabbath, which is was told to us in the good book that was the 7th day that God rested. Actually, if we look Genesis chapter 2, because it was around the beginning of chapter 2, and the first verse was, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all of the host of them, and on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested. And on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. Right? So he rested on the 7th day, and it says that he blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in that day he had rested from all his work which God had created. Because if you remember, after the creation mythology of that book of Genesis, or rather the genes of Isis, okay, in the genes of Isis, we're told that the work ended on the 6th day, because it said in the evening and the morning were the 6th day, right? The evening and the morning were the 6th day. There's so much information in that, so much, you know. But getting back to it, when we look at that number 7, you know, and we see how oftentimes God Almighty, the supreme being, the creator, whatever you know we're rolling with in this season, is oftentimes represented by that number 7. And one of the things that we miss out with that 7, we miss the other correlations. For instance, we have, as we know, the 7 African powers, right? We have the 7 major chakras, right? We have 7 notes in the musical scale. You know, we start on one note, and by the time we go to the last, we're at the 8th note, which is the octave of the first. So the first 7 are actually unique notes. Okay, and we'll come back to that. But in any event, that 7 is a very primal and powerful number. For those of us who study numerology, we know that the number 7 not only represents God, but more importantly, the number 7 represents mystery, right? Number 7 represents mystery, and also knowledge and study. That's the number 7. And that number actually is ruled, or correlates, we'll say, which is a better word, by the planet Saturn. The planet Saturn, also where we get Satan, or also where we get to satisfy. Okay, 7 is usually the number of mystics, you know, philosophers, musicians, composers, scientists, artists, you know, people who can bend energy, bend vibrations, philosophers, you know, things like that. Okay, but here's the interesting thing about the number 7. Also in that good book, we have in the book of Revelations where we hear about the 7 seals, right? And the angel who could open the 7th or the 7 seals. What are those 7 seals? Well, first, let's get back to our 7 chakras, right? Now, our 7 chakras, you know, coming from the root and coming up to what we consider to be the crown. And of course, we have many more chakras. Those are our major. They all have a color to them, with really the 6 of them, with the exception of the crown. But in truth, the crown can either be violet, white, or black, depending on your disposition. So we have these 7 major chakras, and as I've taught you before, because they have a color to them, what they really represent is the trap of humanity, because your chakras represent they're your emotions, right? Whenever you have emotional issues or you need emotional healing, it always correlates to your chakras. Okay, so the reality is the chakras, as I've told you guys before, are a trap. They're a trap of various emotions at various stages. So whether we're dealing with the heart or the solar, the sacral, and we're saying, okay, well, the heart is Ogun and the solar is Oshun or Shango and the sacral is Yemoja, we're either dealing with the polarity of those orishas. So we're either dealing with the heaven or we're dealing with the hell of those particular orisha. So those chakra houses are traps for our souls to be in until it's finally released out of our crown into our ori ipornri, or our spirit double, right? So when we talk about the 7 seals in the Bible, or God is represented by 7, one of the, and I referenced this movie for you all, and I hope you've actually had an opportunity to check it out, The Clash of the Titans, right? And also The Rise of the Titans, good one, right? And we know there was a time where the gods had to be taken out, right? They had to be ended. And those gods are the lower level energies that we needed before we came into our power. It's the things that we feel we need to pray to that lord over us. And sometimes that's your astrological chart. You allow it to lord over you. Sometimes you allow your chakras, your emotions, and things like that, or like I've said many times, your orisha to lord over you. And it's a time where they need to be done away with. Okay, and you vibrate at your top, at you, who you are, fully self-realized, fully self-actualized. So when we're dealing with the 7 seals, we're dealing with a seal is what? Something used to bind and close something up. So we're dealing with 7 ways that you were binded up, 7 ways that you were trapped into a certain reality. That is the 7th seal. Now, at some point, the seals will be open, right? You'll be fully, unleashed, and your deityness and your divineness, right? At some point you'll move totally beyond the chakras, totally beyond emotion, personality, and spirit. Okay, and you'll just be dealing with yourself at the soul level. Now, remember, with your soul, you have your higher self and you have your soul. They're not necessarily the same thing. The higher self is your soul's greatest projection while here on the planet Earth. So, when we do, quote unquote, the right thing or the best thing, we say, well, I'm operating from my higher self, right? But you're operating from your higher self. You are not technically your soul, because by the time you get back to the soul energy, you would have joined again with the coalitions of souls. So we're talking about that full transition. But again, 7 seals are open. Now, what are the 7 seals that are referred to in your Bible? Not only is it your chakra prisons, but it's also the realities that you perceive through your senses. Okay, so what can be sealed up on a person when you're trying to relate, communicate, and share some information with them? What are the first things that they seal up? You think about this for a second, because these are the 7 seals. The first things that they seal up are their eyes. They don't want to see anything. Their ears, they don't want to hear anything, and usually not their mouths, but their mouths are also where wisdom would come out, or ignorance. So now, if you take, their nose, because what you smell deals with another thing. That's also things that go through the air, which deals with our intelligence. Okay, so count those things up that I just gave you. And what you're going to find is that you have the number 7. 2 holes in your ears, for your ears, 2 holes for your eyes, 2 holes for your nostrils, 1 hole for your mouth. 7 seals. Okay? So that would represent the trap. Our trap is when we process things only through those 7 seals, and at some point they need to be open. Now, we know that in our Orisha tradition, Yemoja deals with the number 7, right? Yemoja deals with the number 7. Coming into this world, we come into the world of the traps. We come into the world of the seals. Okay, so when we're looking out of that oval of the womb, right? When we're looking out, getting ready to emerge and, trod onto the planet, as the personality that we incarnated to be, we are coming into the world of the 7 chakras, coming into the world of the 7 gates, coming into the world of the 7 seals. Okay? So now, but what happens before that world of the 7 seals? Well, we have also the number 6, right? Very important number. When you look at the number 6, the number 6 is actually supposed to be a serpent, the way it's drawn. The number 6 is also directly correlated and related to the letter S. Okay? And 6 is correlated to the planet Venus. 6 is correlated to the planet Venus. Now, what's interesting about this is that when we're dealing with the planet Saturn, we're dealing with materialism, or being aware of the material reality, right? Pretty much where things stop, where things get very dense. Whereas when we're dealing with Venus, we're dealing with the idea of creation, of sex. Sex. Same word, same deal, same thing, right? 666, what's the number of man, right? Mark of the beast, the number of man, because at the end of the day, you are the beast. So what's important with this, let's take it to our Orisha studies, right? Who deals with the number 6? Hopefully you all said it already. Shango, right? Shango is our number 6, right? Now, what is Shango? Shango is virility and sexuality. Shango is creation. Shango is virility, sexuality, creation. Shango is our number 6, who is also mated with Oshun, who we know, of course, to be Venus, right? Shango mated with the Venus of Oshun, right? But when we deal, again, going back to what that number 6 signifies, of course, number 6 deals with people who are, very optimistic, cheerful, usually people who are into the finer things in life. The hell and the danger of that 6 is complacency and self-satisfaction, because they can get into and wrap up into this world of pleasure. But again, you kind of know the energies of Shango, because that's what we're dealing with here. And I've shared Shango with you before. So our number 6 deals with creation. So it's very interesting that when we go back to our biblical studies, we're told that the world as we know it was created in 6 days. And on the 7th day, God rested. So what would that mean? That would probably mean that in those 6 days, or dealing with that energy, that vibration of the 6, that's the energy of your active God force, or your active creation. And the energy of the 7, that you think is God, or could be your God. If your God locks you down, that's when God goes to sleep. That's when God rests. So God is active in sex. God is active in 6. Shango, red and white. We know that Shango is the force also not only of activated Ashe like his brother, but he's the force of activated Ashe through creativity, the white of Obatala, right? So Shango being that sex, Venus, Oshun being that sex, being that connective energy of procreation, Yemoja being that energy of not only birth, but we also know salt water brings things to its dissolution and its end. Salt water is very interesting. Salt water brings life to things and healing to things, but it also corrodes and kills things, right? So things stop with Saturn in a sense. In the ancient times, well, not too ancient, but somewhat ancient, we know that Saturn was Chronos. Chronos is time, father time, right? Because time is the energy. Time is the enemy. Time is the problem. So Chronos, Saturn set is where things end and stop. Whereas with Shango or Venus is when things are created. God is creating in those first 6 days. So one of the things that I wanted to speak about when we're dealing with the seals, and of course we'll go into more of it, I wanted to just speak about the 2 seals on the side of your head, where we're talking about your ears and the sacredness of what we hear, or the harmfulness of what we hear is very important. Now, within our speaking and within our music, just within our hearing, we have the sacred sciences of life a lot of times, and they go they go unnoticed, right? So I want to go real simple and take you to the drum. The drum. Whether we're talking about the conga, whether we're talking about the trap set, or what we call drum set, or whether we're talking about djembe, right? Let's just deal with what we call our slap tones. Our slap tones, right? This is something I've had to learn from a very young age, different slap tones, because my father is a percussionist. He was a professional percussionist and, still plays. He's still a extremely accomplished drummer, percussion. So I grew up with drum and playing and learning what drum is supposed to be and represent. More so Latin drum, congas, right? But we have three basic tones, which we could call bass, treble, and mid-range, or what we call bass or open, bass, open, and slap, right? Now the slap would be, a higher pitched, the bass is a heavy pitched, and the open would be like, mid-range. Our ancestors always classified these tones, relating them to the highest science of African culture. What is the highest science of African culture or indigenous culture? The highest science of indigenous culture was Memph Auf Nun, woman, man, child. Woman, man, child. Notice what comes first. Woman, then man, then child, right? So that bass note, or what sometimes we call in drumming the junjun, right? That bass note was considered to be the mother in most systems, right? And then you had the mid-range, which was considered to be the father. And then the high range, or that slap tone, that treble, is considered to be the child. Even in the song you're hearing right now, you hear tats, da-doons, Now that would be the mother. Now, why would that be the mother? Because the mother maintains the foundation and the stability of the home. She maintains that earth rhythm, you see? And the father, which would be more that mid-range, the father kind of clears and leads the way. Whereas you think about a child, you think about the slap tone, the child is always usually making the most noise, or soloing. It's that lead high-pitched solo sound that we would hear. What's interesting too, in the Bata orchestra, that bottom drum or that bass is called Iya. For those of us who know our Yoruba, or know a little bit, you probably heard the term Iya, and Iya means mother, right? And that lead, which is the talker, is also called the invoker. Okay, it's what you use to invocate. To invocate. The junjun, even in the Congo, with that conga drum, that lower note would also again be that mother note. So these low tones they kind of have a physical effect on us. When you listen to the bass notes of a drum, the low notes of a drum, it actually affects our physical disposition. Okay? The bottom notes affect the physical disposition, whereas those mid-range notes will kind of deal with more your emotional disposition. Okay? So it gets much deeper, but I wanted to lead us into our next discussion of music in this way by speaking about the seals first. And now that we have an understanding of those 7 seals and what they represent and what they are, as well as how they correlate to our Orisha, in our next instructional, we're going to be dealing with the actual music. So music that you can use to open up those 7 seals, and music and sounds that close the 7 seals. Okay? So what I want you to do is definitely head over to saduluhouse.com. Like I told you, if you have not signed up for classes, sign up for classes as well at saduluhouse.com. If you need a reading, consultation, you can also get that there. You can go to the hub of saduluhouse.com and get the majority of the services that you would need, or even contact and reach out to us. Okay? So until next time, I am Yuya Assaan-ANU. Peace.